Hi everybody, we're going to go ahead and get started. This microphone is for the live stream, so this should not be projecting my voice to you, I don't think. But thank you guys so much for coming out tonight. We really appreciate your time, and we're really looking forward to hearing your reaction to some of this. So I'm Sarah Hill, I'm the Transportation Director for the City of Durango, and I oversee parking, transit, and our Bike Ped program. This is Wade Moore, he's our Parking Operations Manager. And we have Walker Consultants with us. I'm going to let them introduce themselves, and they're going to go ahead and get the presentation started for us. So thanks.
Thank you. All right. Thank you to everyone who's able to be here tonight and those of you who are joining us via the live stream. My name's Christina. I'm with Walker Consultants based out of Denver. I actually live in the Colorado Springs area, and then I'm also joined virtually by another member of our team who's going to introduce herself here in a moment. But tonight we wanted to talk to you about Durango's parking future, and specifically how we used your feedback during our last round of engagement to help us narrow down some of the strategies that we're going to continue to evaluate throughout this process. And tonight we're asking you to help us give us your initial reactions to these strategies. So, if you'll bear with me here, I've got a few screens going. Just a short presentation before we do jump into that feedback opportunity. What I'd like to discuss with you tonight is a little bit about how we got to where we are today, the background, what our goals are for this project, and then what the next steps are going to be, which seems a little backwards, but for those who are live streaming or following along there, we're going to give them a different opportunity to participate. Same question, just a different format. So we wanted to make sure that they got those next steps as well. So the core members of our team as we're working on this, Sarah and Wade, of course, have introduced themselves and are integral to this process. I am the project manager. I also have about 13 years of operations experience before I came into consulting. And Andrew Vidor, our director of planning, is based in our Denver office. And then we are also joined by Mallory Baker, who I will allow to introduce herself.
Thanks, Chrissy. Good evening, everyone. Thanks for being here tonight. My name is Mallory Baker. I'm a senior consultant in the Denver office at Walker, and I also lead our national community engagement strategy. So I'm helping Chrissy with that particular component of this project. We're hugely passionate about drawing a clear line between the feedback that we get on projects and the ultimate project outcomes. I really wanted to join you today in person, but I have COVID, unfortunately, so we wanted to prioritize keeping the Durango community safe for me and my germs. So I'm here remotely and looking forward to the conversation with you all. Thanks.
So you'll see her down in the corner of our screen here, and she'll be jumping in on the conversation throughout. Now, as we get into this, as I mentioned, a little bit of background of how we got here today. We are looking to build on the comprehensive plan that the city has already done, that you have all provided your feedback on. The character and neighborhood plans, we're not looking to replace those or in any way try to compete with those. This is a complementary effort. This is also, just to differentiate, not the downtown next steps. This is a citywide effort. We're looking at parking for the entirety of Durango, not just the downtown area. We're also looking to provide a set of options for the city. So as many of you know, it is a very long, sometimes drawn out process for city to implement new policies and regulations. This process aims to identify those before they're needed and provide the guidelines around which the city can implement those so that you and council can pre-approve them and they can be implemented much more quickly, which allows city staff and the community to be much more proactive in how you're managing the parking as we go forward. Now, with that, we are presenting strategies in the context of a neighborhood or its land uses. So a residential area, a commercial area, but not a specific residential area. So not Three Springs, not downtown, but how those characteristics of those neighborhoods would feed into those strategies. Again, this is just a toolbox so that the city has these available to implement as and when they are needed. If you joined us at our last presentation, that is what we refer to as our visioning stage. At that point, we were looking to identify not only the challenges, but the opportunities that are available and unique to the city of Durango. That allowed us to take, 200-300 potential strategies and narrow it down to the 20 or so that we're going to share with you today. That way, your time is optimized, and we can take out a lot of the unnecessary strategies that just won't work for Durango to begin with. Our next phase is when we're going to start getting a little bit more specific as we're looking at those potential strategies, and that's what we refer to as our consensus building phase. An example of this is we're going to talk about parking permits tonight. Parking permits are for off-street parking in a facility. They can also be for a residential area, a commercial area. There's dozens of ways that one strategy might be implemented, and it's during that next phase that we'll start working through all of those specifics. So as we're reviewing these, try to keep in mind that we're at a very high level at this point still. Following that is when we're going to get into implementation and action planning, and that's where we get into the nitty-gritty details, if you will, of how much would this cost the city and what are the funding opportunities available for those different strategies. Just a brief kind of rundown of what we were able to accomplish in that last visioning phase. We did have over 1,000 touch points. Some of the opportunities where we heard feedback from you was, of course, through the online questionnaire, which was provided in both English and Spanish. We had the public open house, as well as we have our project advisory committee, which is comprised of those who have more of a technical background when it comes to mobility and community planning. And then we had a representative at the farmers market who was able to capture some more visitor and resident feedback as well. With that, we were able to use your feedback not only in terms of identifying opportunities and some of the challenges, but providing those in the context of those different types of neighborhoods. So some of the key themes that we identified both through your feedback as well as through our quantitative analysis of the data is, and I don't think this is going to be a surprise to anyone here, in the residential areas, especially those that are adjacent to downtown and some of the high, more dense commercial areas, is that there is spillover coming from employees and customers who are visiting those areas. One of the really interesting things that we identified through the questionnaire is about 1 in 3 residents have private off-street parking that they are not using for their vehicles. Rather, they're using it for storage of toys or just additional storage for, if you will, holiday decorations. Some are using it for accessory dwelling units. So additional parking demands generated in what would have accommodated their private parking needs. In the downtown area, again, not a big surprise here, July has historically been the peak season in terms of parking demands. That generally occurs in the late morning, about midday. And what you'll see here in this chart is the darker line is the transaction demand reflected. So based on what people pay for parking, this is the observed parking demand. The lighter line is a projected parking demand based on the types of land uses down there. There's a lot of restaurants downtown, a lot of nightlife. So while the transactions are tapering off throughout the afternoon, that's more driven because parking's not charged in the evening. It's not enforced. So the demand's there, it's just not being reflected through that data. Another item that we identified is that there is existing capacity within the area. However, that doesn't exist where people want to park. So how can we better utilize some of that existing capacity? As we're looking out into other neighborhoods throughout the city, the parks, specifically around the trailheads and some of the commercial areas, activity centers, if you will, have high demands that are generally accommodated within the existing public right-of-way, but some of the existing regulations don't allow that parking demand to be accommodated within the right-of-way legally. We also saw a significant undersupply of RV and bus parking, but there is available spaces at the Santa Rita Park. It's just, is that communicated to those who could benefit from it? Within the Oxbow and Bodo areas, again, known activity centers there, not a big surprise. There's the parking demands that are exceeding what their supplies are. But again, can generally be accommodated, just that supply is not currently actively managed. So as we're moving into our current phase of this planning effort, as I mentioned, we are going to be looking to you to give us your feedback on some of those preliminary strategies that we've identified. We've pulled these from industry best practices, as well as some of the emerging trends that we've seen specifically over the last couple of years as the way that we have commuted for work and personal needs, groceries, deliveries, e-commerce, vacation patterns, as well as looking to some of the peer communities, not only within Colorado, but within New Mexico and other gateway communities to national parks, where you have a lot of outdoor recreation, so forth. With that, we are also looking at the future parking needs. So we have looked at the existing conditions, and we're going to carry that forward into how is the population growing? How are visitors changing? How are they interacting with the parking system as we continue to move forward? So with this, we've relied on the 2017 comp plan, which did do some population projections. We also looked at lodging tax over the last few years. But one of the things that we noticed with the lodging tax records is COVID had a big impact on when hotels were open. And even though visitors were continuing to come to Durango, that wasn't reflected in the tax. So we've reached out to Visit Durango, and they have kept really great records of visitors to the area. And we're incorporating that data into our future parking needs analysis as well. And after today, we're going to take your feedback and continue to narrow down the strategies that we're considering. We're going to do a little bit more technical evaluation on those, putting some metrics to them, so taking the qualitative data that you've provided and complementing that with a quantitative analysis. A good example of that is we have heard quite frequently, just build a parking garage. Build more parking and they'll use it. Someone will use it. But as we look at that, there's other considerations to be had. The cost of building a garage. Is the demand there to fill the garage? So we're going to complement, again, your feedback with that quantitative analysis, and that's just an example of that. So we will be coming back to you in October. I want to say that will be October 20th, tentatively, to ask for your feedback on those implementation considerations. So if a recommendation is for a permit parking program in a residential neighborhood, that might be implemented based on occupancy within the area, as well as requests by the community. And from that, we would ask for your input on what do you think would be a good pricing strategy around that. If it's an inclusive permit program, does that cost get passed on to those who are not the residents necessarily, but the customers and the visitors who might be paying parking fees or have time limits? Does that cost go to the residents who have the permits? So as we look through today's strategies, try not to get too bogged down in details. These strategies right now are intended to remain fairly nebulous. Okay. Now with that, just a couple quick reminders. Not every strategy is intended to serve every neighborhood. Some have the intent to serve, for example, customers, others residents, others employees. And as we're looking at these, try to keep that intended user in mind, as well as what would be the greater benefit to the entire community. So How does it impact you? How does it impact the intended user? How does it impact the community at large? Again, some strategies are going to take some time and repetition and consistency before the community will see the full benefit that they can provide. A great example of this is transit. I think we can all agree transit is a wonderful service to provide the community. Knowing that it's going to be at your stop every day at the same time makes it much easier to use that and to come to rely on it. If you implement a strategy and only give it a couple weeks or even just a couple of months and then continue to change it, it's not something that people can come to rely on, and long term it will not be successful. So I apologize. Okay. Again, these strategies, very preliminary. They have not been evaluated specifically for Durango just yet. That's the process that we're starting here with you today. And each strategy will have different implementation considerations and possibilities. As I mentioned with the permit program, they can be inclusive, exclusive. So as we're going through these strategies, we do ask that you not jump in and start voting right away. Please allow us the opportunity to describe that strategy to you and some of the considerations that go into it before you give your vote. We do have roughly 20 strategies to get through in about an hour and a half, which is going to go very quickly, and we would like to save time at the end for questions and comments that you might have. So if you can, please hold those until that time. We would really appreciate it. We also ask that because of the acoustics in the room and the microphones, those who are joining us online and via Zoom really can't hear too well when there's more than one person talking. So it might be a little juvenile, but if you could please raise your hand and we'll try to get to everyone and get all of your comments incorporated and recorded for those purposes. So with that, as I mentioned, for those who are joining us via the live stream, there is a SurveyMonkey option. It's the exact same strategies. It's just a self-guided option. It's provided, again, both in English and Spanish. Spanish, we just got the translation, so I'm going to get that posted here tonight, but that website will be available on the city's website. Please be patient with us. The English version is available now. And with that, we are going to go ahead and jump into our Menti program and end our live stream. So again, for those who are on the live stream, this website is available on the city's website, and if you can scan that code on your computer, you're welcome to participate that way.